Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, today we're really cutting straight through the hype around generative AI. We're zeroing in on where it's actually making a difference, creating measurable value. And that place is the pharmaceutical supply chain. We've pulled together the latest analysis on Pharma 4.0, that whole shift to connected, smart manufacturing. And our mission for you today is pretty specific. We want to pin down where GenAI offers the fastest, biggest economic boost, and then crucially, figure out the detailed data roadmap you actually need to prove those savings. To investors, to regulators, everyone. Because, let's face it, that's the gap, isn't it, between the potential and the actual performance?
It really is. It's a critical distinction. And what's so interesting here is GenAI isn't just about tweaking things. It's like the next big productivity jump for the whole life sciences sector. You see analysts forecasting this could add something like, what, $60 to $110 billion annually in economic value.
That's just a colossal number. It suggests, well, a fundamental change, not just, small efficiency gains.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking at maybe a 30, even 40% productivity lift across the board. And a lot of that comes from automating tasks, maybe up to 40% of work hours in life sciences, which, frees up those highly skilled people to focus on the really high value stuff like innovation instead of just crunching data.
Right. And we see that impact most dramatically in R&D, I suppose, where the timelines are just, well, notoriously long.
Yeah, that's where the sources show some really huge time savings. GenAI could potentially shorten drug discovery timelines by, get this, 70%. And for clinical trials, it might speed up startup and finding patients by up to 5 times. That kind of speed is a direct path to market. Huge competitive advantage.
Okay, but here's the tension we found in the sources. Everyone sees this massive potential ROI, right? But getting the hundreds of millions needed for full deployment means companies have to focus. They need use cases that show measurable, direct cost savings now, especially in the supply chain. We can't just keep talking about the amazing R&D possibilities forever.
Precisely. You've got to start with the quick wins. And the sources actually give a pretty clear framework for this. It looks at strategic fit, ROI, how much effort it takes, the risk level. And when you apply that specifically to the supply chain, where inventory, procurement, logistics costs are enormous, the top value cases, they're all about end-to-end automation and predictive analytics.
Okay, so let's say you're the executive holding the purse strings for that first big Gen AI investment. Where does the money go first? What are the absolute top 3 SCM areas for the biggest, fastest return?
Okay, rank number 1, no question. Demand forecasting and inventory optimization. This has the highest, most direct ROI. We're talking maybe 10 to 30% reduction in holding costs, stockout costs. Plus, you get a nice 15 to 20% efficiency boost for your planners. The reason? It's direct savings. Less waste, fewer lost sales, capital turns over faster.
That makes total sense. Cutting down on unnecessary inventory, especially with pharma shelf life issues, feels like getting cash back instantly. But given how sensitive drug shortages are politically and for patients, does this push for efficiency create any new risks? Did the sources mention that?
That's a fair point. It definitely highlights the compliance challenge, which is why that data structure we'll talk about is so vital. But interestingly, the GenAI models themselves are often better at mitigating risk than older methods. They can predict those really specific regional spikes or SKU-level demand changes, which actually helps reduce the chance of big stockouts that cause patient harm or fines.
Okay, good point. So what's number 2 on that priority list?
Number 2 is procurement automation and sourcing. Now, the direct cost reduction in managing procurement is maybe 5 to 10%. But the really eye-popping number is the productivity boost for the people doing the work. It's massive, 50 to 80%.
Right. That's where you really see GenAI flexing its muscles, churning through massive amounts of documents, drafting better contracts, analyzing supplier risk way faster than humans can.
Absolutely. It speeds up the whole RFP cycle, lets procurement folks focus on strategic relationships, not just paperwork.
Okay, and rank 3 sounds a bit more sci-fi, but seems to be picking up steam, the self-driving supply chain.
Yeah, or autonomous decision-making. That's the idea of GenAI acting like a control tower, making real-time decisions about routing, inventory shifts, when disruptions happen, often without a human needing to step in. Now, the predicted direct ROI is a bit smaller, maybe 2 to 3% reduction in overall supply chain costs, but the value here is resilience. It's about preventing those huge, costly disruptions, the ones that might only hit once every few years, but can just wipe out months of profit.
Got it. So the framework seems clear then. Phase 1 is demand forecasting, procurement, inventory optimization. They tick the boxes. High strategic importance, relatively low implementation risks. Those are your quick wins.
Exactly. Those are the ones. But okay, since demand forecasting and inventory optimization are the biggest prize, we have to tackle the main hurdle. How do you actually measure that productivity lift? How do you attribute the savings? You can't just, claim a 20% saving and expect people to believe it. You need solid, auditable proof.
Right. This is where we get down to brass tacks, moving from just talking about potential to actually proving performance. And that means specific key performance indicators,
Hmm.
KPIs. We need to look beyond simple cost cuts to real efficiency metrics.
Yeah, a classic example is the inventory turnover ratio, or ITR. It's basically cost of goods sold divided by average inventory. The formula isn't the point, but what it means strategically. A higher ITR tells you if the Gen AI is actually helping you move that inventory faster, freeing up cash. If that ratio isn't going up measurably, the project isn't delivering like it should.
And the flip side of that is inventory days on hand, DOH.
Mm-hmm.
How many days is your capital stuck sitting there at stock? A lower DOH means better optimization. Super critical for expensive pharma products with short shelf lives.
Definitely. Then you track the direct costs too, obviously. Reductions in inventory carrying costs, that's storage, insurance, cost of capital tied up. And on the service level side, the stockout rate. That absolutely has to go down. That shows GenAI is making supply more reliable, which ties right back to patience and compliance.
And super important for pharma, tracking the drop in obsolete inventory. Expired products are a huge financial drain. Reducing that is a really clean, direct sign of better demand forecasting. The results from early adopters are pretty compelling, right? Sources are showing things like 15–25% jumps in turnover, 10–20% drops in carrying costs once GenAI is in place.
They are significant numbers. But that leads us straight to the really deep challenge. You've got these great results, but how do you really prove that those savings came directly from the GenAI forecast itself? How do you separate its impact from, say, a general market upswing or maybe some other improvement project running at the same time? This demands a really solid, comprehensive data structure, a proper schema.
The data plumbing. There's a part that often gets overlooked, and then the investment doesn't pay off. Because you don't structure the data right from the start, you just can't attribute the savings later. Our sources were quite specific about the unique IDs you need to build this traceable system.
Yeah, you need the basics, like your product or SKU code, obviously. But critically, you need a forecast ID. That specific identifier links that particular forecast instance to the downstream actions, the orders placed. And you need an inventory record to link it all the way through to the actual physical stock movements.
And here's the bit that's absolutely essential, the non-negotiable for pharma. The batch number or lot number.
Exactly. It's almost ironic, isn't it? You have this incredibly complex GenAI model running maybe in the cloud somewhere, yet the entire system's traceability, its regulatory compliance, hinges on something as fundamental and, frankly, old school as that lot number. Without that granular tracking, you just cannot connect a high-level prediction to a specific compliant batch of medicine moving through the system.
Okay, so to make that connection work, the sources point to 5 core data tables. 4 seem pretty standard: forecast data, inventory data, cost financial metrics, and actual sales or usage. But it's the 5th one that's often the missing link, the crucial piece of infrastructure.
That's the attribution table. Think of it as the switchboard, the linkage layer. It connects the forecast ID, the inventory record, and the cost recorded. And crucially, it documents how you measured the savings the attribution method you used. Was it a baseline comparison? A pilot study? This table is what provides the audit trail. It removes the doubt and ensures accountability.
Okay, so let's say we've built this rigorous data architecture. We have the plumbing in place. How do organizations actually use those attribution methods? How do they isolate the AI's impact from all the other noise in the supply chain?
Well, you usually need a mix of methods. The simplest place to start is often baseline comparison. Just track your key metrics holding costs, stockouts, whatever, for a decent period, say 6 to 12 months, before you deploy the GenAI. Then track the same metrics for the same period after. It gives you a good first look, an indication.
But that's correlation, not necessarily causation,
Yeah.
right? For real proof, you need something more controlled.
Exactly. That's where controlled pilots or A/B testing come in, and these work really well in pharma. You basically run the new GenAI forecast for one specific group, maybe one product line or one region, and you keep another similar group running on the old traditional forecasting method. That's your control group. The difference in performance, in costs between those two groups, that difference is much more clearly attributable directly to the AI. It isolates the variable.
Makes sense. And then there's the really detailed approach, the one the finance folks tend to love modeling it mathematically.
Right, that's statistical analysis, using techniques like regression analysis to actually model the precise relationship. How much cost reduction do you get for every percentage point improvement in forecast accuracy? And the sources actually put numbers on this. Some studies show a consistent value, like, say, $800 saved for every single percent improvement in accuracy. Now, that is rigorous proof you can build a business case on.
That kind of specific number is incredibly powerful, isn't it? So when organizations combine that solid data structure with these robust attribution methods, what kind of results should they realistically expect? What are they aiming for?
Well, based on the pilots and early implementations we're seeing, the cost savings that can be confidently tied back to Gen AI forecasting, it's typically landing in the 15% to 22% range, usually within the first 3 to 5 years. The key takeaway for you listening is that the investment isn't just buying the fancy AI algorithm, it's investing in the traceability, the data systems, the methods needed to prove that the algorithm is actually delivering that ROI.
Okay, this has been a really thorough deep dive. Let's recap quickly. We started with the big picture. GenAI offers this massive economic potential for pharma, maybe up to $110 billion a year. But the path to actually capturing that value, it's about being strategic. Prioritize those high-impact supply chain functions first, things like demand forecasting that promises up to 30% ROI, and procurement automation, delivering potentially up to an 80% productivity lift. Huge numbers.
Huge numbers, yes. But extracting that value, it all comes down to the data plumbing, as you called it. You absolutely have to set up that structured schema, linking SKUs, forecast ideas, and crucially for pharma, those regulatory batch numbers. And then use rigorous methods, pilots, baseline, statistical analysis to make sure the savings you see are genuinely traceable back to the AI itself. Because accountability is just everything when you're talking about investments on this scale.
And looking ahead, it seems the initial focus is clearly on direct cost cutting and automation.
It is, yes. That's where the immediate, easiest to measure ROI is. But the value proposition around resilience, that gaining ground fast, we saw that with the self-driving supply chain concept. So here's maybe a final provocative thought for you to chew on. Given that the pharma supply chain isn't just about cost, it's fundamentally linked to patient safety, to regulatory compliance, how much faster might we see adoption for Gen AI use cases that primarily target compliance risk? Think about things like QA and compliance automation sources suggest that could make audits 10–40% faster. Will those sorts of applications maybe overtake the purely cost-saving ones sooner than we think? Because in pharma, maybe the ultimate competitive edge isn't just efficiency, but superior safety and regulatory speed, something to consider.